Oh, hi, my name is Dru Rai, and today I have Michael Yamnitsky to join us, and we'll talk about some of the cool stuff he's working on in AI, data management, cybersecurity, and whatnot. Before we get into the details, Michael, welcome. Thank you for your
Thank you
time. I
very much.
really appreciate it. Um, Tell us a little bit about you before we get into the content.
Sure. So I've spent the past 15 years in enterprise software. I was one of the first set of PMs at Datadog. I worked on building security products there and have spent the last few years as a managing director at Insight Partners, where I uh, worked with companies across DevOps, security, and cloud infrastructure.
Cool. So let's get into some of the details. You know, you've been in this industry for a while, so you're not a newcomer. Tell me about the early days of security to today. What has changed? Like, what is so different, both in offense, the bad guys, and the defense, the good guys who are trying to protect? What do you see the changes in evolution in the last few years?
Gosh, well, a lot has changed. One, the actual footprint is way bigger, way more diverse, right? Like we went from securing the data center to securing the uh, the cloud to now securing employees, customers, partners, stakeholders all around the world. And now it's even more wide and dispersed because now we have a new thing, generative AI, which is really changing the landscape, which I think not only does that technology bring new risks to the table, right? In terms of things like prompt injection and other various techniques you can use, but also just the scope just has expanded of what you want to do with it because, you know, it's kind of like a drug, right? You really think about it, like generative AI is so powerful, we can't avoid it. Like if you think about the cloud era, we were somewhat constrained in how we actually worked and really went to the cloud. It was first like went and, put some stuff in staging. Some workloads were there. It was kind of like a bespoke team. But with generative AI, you want to put your data in, you want to automate your business. There's so much you want to do there. And so I think it's just going to evolve so quickly, which means the risks are going to evolve way faster.
Yeah, I mean, again, let's talk a little bit about the models, the data management, and so on and so forth. I remember, when the cloud was in very early stage and people like me had doubts like, wait a minute, how do I trust giving access to somebody? And then how they're not going to exploit that? How the heck they're going to manage, the concept of the multi-tenant. And then obviously CIA signs up a deal with AWS and they're like, well, wait a minute, if they can do it, then we should be able to do it too. Here we are. Public cloud is kind of the standard. Private cloud still exists. And there is a multi-cloud environment. Almost every software company is a SaaS company. And here comes, let's just call it AI, whether it's a generative, predictive, multimodal, all kinds of, which the algorithm, the brain, is built by the data itself. So it's it's related to the existing data because that's what you train and build on. When you think about data management, once upon, as you said, the data center management, and now it's all over the place. And you went to talk about now you're managing not the system, not the network, not the servers, not the data center, but the data itself, the customer, the employees, and so on and so forth. So put that cybersecurity hat, we used to create a moat, and if the data center is protected, well, life is okay. But now we are everywhere. How companies, and in your point of view, are dealing with protecting data? Because ultimately, that's all we're protecting is the data. Like, what is the evolution in terms of cybersecurity, and what are we working on today to get to the data and obviously the model itself? But like, talk to me about some of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, the traditional techniques, protecting the core of the infrastructure, protecting the data itself, like a lot of those, in my mind, don't change at all. We kind of need more of it and we need to be more scrupulent, but it's a lot of the same techniques. I think, one thing that's fascinating is, because we're going to want to put so much data into the AI, we're going to want to use it so much, is what is the quality of that data? I think that's something that, the both security and IT teams are really sort of, I don't feel like the actual industry is talking about this enough, but it feels like it's a problem that we haven't fully solved yet.
No, it's kind of funny you say that the quality of data, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini, when I ask question, the answers are never wrong or right. It's the shade of gray you get,
Yeah.
which is fascinating. But at the end of the day, when you work for a client or a customer or investor, they're just going to look at black and white. Is it or is it not? Back to the data quality problem. In this world where the brain of LLMs are actually, the algorithm itself is decided by the data you train on, how good or bad. How are we going to go from where we are? I mean, are we going to, we've been trying to clean the data forever, and
Yeah.
that probably is, never going to be ending. So the question becomes, and people are talking AGI and all kinds of stuff. How are we going to go from improving the accuracy of AI to black and white, not just shade of gray, when we have the quality data problem all over the place?
Totally. Well, I think, one thing we sort of inherently kind of accept is that the models are going to be trained on outside data. Yes, there will be cases, there'll be certain functions, certain applications when you're going to want to train or you would want to fine tune or model on your own systems. But we kind of need to accept that, we're going to use these outside models and then what context do we give it? And now what I'm seeing is that, there's just this rush now for IT, security, DevOps, like all of the sort of folks that are supporting running the ship all want to use AI. They want to automate where they can. And it's a gold rush, right? Like we have Claude Code. It can generate code. Like it's incredible. Workflow automation has been solved for. But there's a lack of trust right now. And that lack of trust is in the data that you're feeding it. How do you know when you're giving endpoint data coming from a user that this is the right information at the right time, right? Like there's different systems that all need to be correlated to get a live view. Like what is the state of my environment? What is the state of my systems, and do I trust it? Do I trust it for workflow automation? Do I trust it for reporting? It's kind of this age-old problem that we've had. Like that's something that we need to solve, I think, so that we can successfully go to a world of using the AI full for full automation.
You think, talk to me about, new product and solutions being created to take full potential of AI. These models have a lot of potentials. The better the data, to your point, the better the accuracy and automation, and hopefully that helps everyone in this society. So what are the product and solutions and, guardrails, policy, talk to me about everything about, the data to make sure these models, which are trained outside, but ultimately, hopefully they get better and better inside because, you have some control. What are the things organization needs to think about when it comes to quality of data or building pipelines and normalizing the data and, storing unstructured and structured data? And it's like, what are the key themes which we need to put in place? Some people call it data governance, but I think it's more than that. I'm looking more from how to solve this problem at scale so that the AI is more beneficial than it has been.
Totally. I think you just hit on sort of the biggest thing, and this is what, if you're a large global 2000, like this is the thing to be thinking of, is how do I get my data into a place where it can be useful for the AI. And like, we sort of call these things context engines, and right now they manifest in lots of places. The most common one is people are using graph databases where they can put a bunch of data in. They don't need to really sort of think about the schema and all these things. They can just find relationships and sort of give you good context of what relates to what. How are these two systems related? What is the state of this one? What is the state of that one? And that's quite useful. But I think that we kind of need to do this by individual domains. I don't think we can sort of build the ultimate brain for the fully like autonomous enterprise quite yet. We really need to like think about things in very sort of constrained ways. And I think that various startups and bigger companies are tackling these problems. Some are actually putting it in their verticalized solution that solves workflow automation for X problem, and some are actually giving you the features and the functions to do this on your own.
It's kind of funny you say that. I'm sure you know Palantir, building the semantic or basically ontology at the enterprise level, to your point, creating relationship which makes sense within an enterprise so that the whole enterprise can kind of work faster and even execute the potential of AI going great. Talk to me about from cybersecurity perspective. What are the trends you're seeing to, we have a lot of kind of pinpoint solutions like, well, buy this tool, it'll solve this, buy this tool, it'll solve this. But to a CISO, they're all kind of connected. I mean, it's very hard to take detection out and then remediation. They're kind of related. It's more or less the same data. It comes from various places, but the team which has to detect and remediate and so on and so forth is the same team. How the industry is thinking about, like, how do we stitch this? How do we glue this? Like, or are we gonna be living in this best of breed, point solution forever?
Gosh, this is a really interesting question, Drew. Um, okay, so a couple facets to this, and I think it ties back to your point around Palantir, actually, and ontology. Ontology to me is the thing that stitches everything together. And like, look, I think the security industry has thrived on, new threat vector out there. We're going to create solution for X. The usual startup playbook is I'm going to go talk to 30 CISOs and find that sort of consensus idea and go try to solve just that problem. And, and the sort of parallel for that is, you talk to most CISOs and they say, well, I have too many vendors. I want consolidation. Please help me. Where do I find that? And I actually think it's a really hard problem and takes a certain type of, founder and a certain type of patience to be like, wait, can we actually solve some of the fundamental problems? Like, can I help security teams answer basic questions that actually stem across the different domains in simpler ways? That actually takes more of a unified data model than what you see inside of most security startups today. And I do think it's important. I think one of the things that we really have available to us is like, there used to be like modes where you had to stick within certain domains as a builder, right? Because there was cost to build the different data integrations, train classical or machine learning models on certain data sets that solve certain problems. The cost of integration code is going to zero now, right? Like we're all using AI. It's so much easier. So now's the time that we can actually do this. And I think that this is one of the biggest gaps right now is just like, what is the common data model for things? So I can just answer questions about my systems and my threats out there.
That's really interesting. Let's get into some of the the bad guys using AI. Because they're out there too. Their full-time job is to utilize every possible way of whether creating a very context-specific phishing or I've seen emails where it looks like I wrote it. I mean, it's my sentences. Sometimes I don't say dear blah blah blah. It was just like so surreal that the phishing is no longer a dumb thing. It's just very contextual. You getting as a CEO text, your employee getting text like, oh, you call Michael, or Michael says do this. Um, the contextual cybersecurity attacks are actually coming from AI. I mean, talk about human identity. Now, the bots which can write APIs. There are more bots out there than the humans. If you think about the identity in your network, which you can potentially create, it's like a 1:2,000,000. One guy or girl can create thousands and millions of bots and just do whatever they want. Those days of hiring an army to do the bad things is over. I mean, so here we are talking about data and talking about how can we make model work, how can we make AI more productive. At the same time, you have AI being used to maliciously to do things. So talk about how we're going to solve AI malicious with AI good guys. Like, what are the things industries thinking, or people like you thinking? Like, I wish I can do this so I can, avoid this kind of malicious attack. How are you thinking using AI to solve the cybersecurity problem, which to some extent coming from AI itself?
I feel like it's going to be really hard to say we're going to battle the bad guys using AI because the AI is everywhere, right? Access to models is just widespread. I do not feel like that's going to be a winning battle, but I just feel like where we're at today, like you go to most companies today and where they're at in their sort of process, to me, there's a lot of faster wins that we can do here to help so that when that attack comes, that's powered by AI, that is going to get into your environment. Let's just like call it for what it is. They're going to get in. How can you react faster? Using traditional techniques, even like we do not need to reinvent the wheel, but how is your SOC team, how is your team going to react faster? And I think that's almost like, it feels like a little bit of a like avoided question. It kind of feels like that's the question to answer because it's something we can control today.
You're absolutely right. I think it's like saying my social security, my personal identity, my bank account is already exposed. How do you protect yourself? Do you lock your credit? Do you monitor your credit everything to make sure nobody's opening accounts? And I think, that's the real zero trust. You have to assume that the bad guy is already inside. Now you probably have to go behavioral. It's like, oh, this doesn't look like, behavior this would have done, and creating some of those things. And that's what, when I look at my vantage point, it has gone from protecting network with username password that assume that is already being compromised. The bad people are inside, and they even have access to data. How do you find out abnormal behavior or not normal behavior? How do you make it so contextualized that you can, and not only you have to flag it, because we all live in a world of thousands notifications, like which notification I should act on.
Yeah.
Then you have to develop some probability model that, okay, well, this one is high and this one is you can ignore. And that's what I'm seeing. It's like it's the security landscape has changed from creating a moat so nobody enters to like, oh, everybody is in. Now I need to figure out every human being around me or every bot or every entity around me, I can't trust. They have to prove it before I do any. It's like even the APIs. We only want runtime access. We don't want to give, well, this API runs all the time, regardless of whether it's sleeping or not sleeping.
Yeah.
There is a huge change I see happening as we speak. And to be honest, it's actually prompted by the bad guys because they have figured this thing out. A runtime API is one of the easiest thing. Who pays attention to API keys? It's probably left. Nobody who encrypts that in the first place, right? It's just mind-boggling to see the cybersecurity and AI being. Let me pivot to some of the personal thing. So what are you working on right now? Tell us some important problems and solutions you're bringing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I'm back to building and really, really excited to be doing that. So I'm a founder of a new company. We're still in stealth, so we're not quite speaking too much about what we're doing yet, but, we sort of spoke about this a bit already, Dru, but, one of the fundamental problems I think is, this whole world now where we can automate everything inside of our companies, but yet we still haven't solved that challenge of what is like, do I have trust in the data? Do I have trust that I can see the systems that we're trying to automate underneath? That's the core problem we're trying to solve for both IT and for security teams.
Interesting. So, without going into the details, when the solution or whatever solution you're thinking, like if I'm the security team, like how would I know that this is a trusted and this is not? Like what are the basic parameters organizations should be using to do that?
Yeah, I think, one real problem is people just don't trust that the data's live. Like, so there's a whole spectrum going from like looking at cloud environments to looking at what's happening with a user's laptop, right? I look at the cloud and I want to look at a server. I have like a near real time API. Like I could go see it, and yes, there might be some sort of specific performance guarantees, a little bit of latency, but it's not that bad. If I go talk about a user's laptop and what's going on there, we don't know when that user's laptop was last open, so that the MDM checked in. We don't know, like, if we patched a vulnerability on that user's machine, when did the vulnerability software that provides the report for management, when did that update, right? So it's kind of like we need to think in terms of probabilities here when we say, like, we are looking to use artificial intelligence on the live state of your environment. What is that? Like at point in time, what happened? When the breach happened? What was going on? Who was doing what? Which is getting very complex these days, particularly when you think about if we're going to use AI agents, if they are the new coworkers, what is that going to look like?
Interesting. Yeah, I can't even fathom the complexity of the problem, especially when you think about the autonomous agent, especially running the show. Let's pivot to a little personal. Tell us how you ended up here. Like, tell us your story from school to like why this field? How was it by design or accident or luck? Tell us Michael's story.
Yeah, totally. So, it's kind of funny. I grew up in Boston and had always sort of been fascinated by building and creating things. My father is a software entrepreneur. He started his company back in 1995. I was a kid then. He ran it in my grandma's basement. And my first job, actually, I think I was like, you know, 7 years old at the time, was actually putting CD-ROMs inside of packages, laminating them. So I'd like seen the software supply chain delivery from the start. Um, I have had a lot of creative outlets. I played classical guitar growing up and almost went to conservatory. I worked in the music industry as well. So kind of like I've had a lot of, what sort of drives me is just creating and building things. And that's what sort of led me here. It was funny. Um, I just like saw what was happening with digital and cloud and just saw what you can do with software and thought like, wow, like this is at the bleeding edge. This is what I want to do.
Good. So here we are, right? Now you run your own venture. Um, let's talk about the future of, I would call, cybersecurity. Like what trends you see in next 5 to 10 years? Like what, as far as you can see, in terms of the problem and the solutions. Like what should a young entrepreneur who is listening to this podcast should be thinking about? It's like, maybe I should study this, maybe I should learn this, maybe this is the opportunity. Like what's your forecast? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think, understand or model behavior. I think, people from the research side that really understand large language models and how they work, that's going to be a really key thing because I think that that's going to be the fundamental force behind the markets is really what we're going to see play out. And I think we don't have enough people in the cyber industry who have that research background. And bringing that into the fold is going to be incredibly important, not just for founders, but just across. If you think about it, every company that now is going to use large language models, like think about if they have a security breach, they have a performance incident, they need someone who understands the software, the code, the infrastructure, but also how the model is interacting with it. This is going to become a new skill that people just need to learn. And we haven't seen that force kind of sits inside of foundational model providers and is now bleeding into some startups that are sort of growing at scale. But we haven't seen that wide sort of really dispersed understanding and that domain in the wider world.
It's kind of funny you say that. I've been doing this for a long period of time, and when I think about my CISO and the team, they basically have a detective and enforcement. And those are the two things they do. Research is a different ball game, which is required if you really want to build a solution. And I mean, they're not probably going to build solution. They're definitely going to consume the solution to get the job done. And I find that interesting. And that's why I think cyber is becoming a very crowded field because it does solve problem here and there. Although integration and rationalization of vendor continues to be a issue with CISO, if you ask. So pivoting back to when you put on your kind of societal hat, it's like how the society is going to change with AI. Love to hear your prediction. It's like, what do you think we will be doing in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, like what's going to happen? What's your forecast?
Well, I think, next couple of years is just, we're doing a lot of building, that's what really drove me back to the building side is I just feel like now's the time to kind of define the future of, service management, security, whatever the category is that you're operating in. We can just rethink these things from first principles. That to me is the really, really exciting thing. I think from a society perspective, like, look, now it's kind of like the time of the generalist. If you are particularly people who are creative and like at the intersection of domains. And I've seen this. I was actually just talking to a friend last night who is both a software operator and a lawyer and a couple other things too. But, he was like showing me some of this work he was doing, looking at the markets, and he was incredible. And I was like, man, like you just beat all the equity analysts, I think, in the game because you are just like going across domains and just like using the model in such a interesting way. Um, I feel like these people are going to thrive, and there's kind of like a couple year opportunity now where it's like if you're at the bleeding edge, you kind of have superpowers, right? Because like look, a lot of the world is kind of like still just reacting to this stuff like, oh, ChatGPT, yeah, sure, we can do some stuff, but it's not going to do real work. It's not serious. But people who are like really kind of embracing it are going to like win in weird ways that we can't really sort of describe yet, whether it's at work, whether it's in their personal life. You're just going to see these crazy gains. Um, I do think a couple years out, and again, like take that sort of time frame with a grain of salt. Things are moving so fast; it's hard to say what's a few years, what's a few months. But we're definitely gonna have more specialized models. If you think about it now, like yes, you can use the foundational models to help with drug discovery, but I think we need models that are really purpose built for drug discovery. And so, what does that mean? That means at some point of time in the future, um, we are gonna have the specialists are gonna thrive, right? It's the people that right now, it's funny, like a lot of specialists I know, a lot of like deep sort of PhDs and smart people are kind of one foot in, one foot out on using AI because again, to them, it's like the AI can't do what I do. I'm that last mile of information. But if you give these people a specialized model, they're going to be thriving and they're going to win, right? And then, if we think about the future of having AGI, I don't know, it's not something that I think about sort of day to day, but you could imagine if that really becomes the future, we kind of live in a world where um, kind of value is like hedge fund operations. It's very much like finding that small little arbitrage. Like human figures out one thing that the models haven't quite picked up on yet and can manipulate the market to create value. That seems like sci-fi to me, but you can imagine that.
Well, folks, you heard it, Michael's prediction, and I definitely agree with a lot of things. But we're gonna wait and see. Michael, thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again, especially with your new project. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Dru. Thank you to everyone here.